Infrastructure as code has gone from a developer convenience to a strategic necessity for enterprises, and now even for the US government. And in this space, Spacelift is one such company that we love to talk to. And they just made headlines as the first IaC orchestration platform to achieve FedRAMP certification, a huge step for public sector adoption. On top of that, the company closed a 51 million Series C. They expanded their community reach with IaCConf, and they're pushing the boundaries of how infrastructure automation should work at a scale. On the brand new episode of Secure by Design, we have with us once again Dimitri Vlachos, CMO at Spacelift, to talk about what these milestones mean for the company, for the community, and for the future of automation. Dimitri, it's great to have you on the show.
Nice to see you again, Swapnil.
Of course, we are going to talk about the certification, but before that, can you please explain to our viewers who may not know what exactly is FedRAMP and what role it plays in the federal space?
I think there's two real parts to talk about FedRAMP. One, there's a big push, there has been for a number of years, for agencies, government agencies to move to the cloud. And there's been a real, for efficiencies and security. And one of the things that really started to, the government really came to realize is, hey, if you're going to be operating in the cloud and you're using different SaaS offerings, we need a standard of an operating environment that's secure, that meets the requirements the government has. And that's really where FedRAMP comes from. So FedRAMP is a set of requirements for your operating environment to be secure and, run in a secure fashion.
Excellent. Thank you. And now let's talk about Spacelift becoming the first orchestration platform to earn FedRAMP certification. What does this mean for government agencies and contractor? And how does it position Spacelift in the whole public sector?
Yes. So I think there's a couple, what does it mean for Spacelift? I think it's more important what it means for the industry, right? I think for the industry, it means as you're moving to the cloud and you're trying to build applications in the cloud, government agencies, you need to do that in a FedRAMP secure environment. And so Spacelift, we're right there helping people manage their infrastructure, deploy infrastructure in cloud environments. And the fact that we are the first orchestration engine to be FedRAMP certified means that organizations can now turn to us to help them automate and streamline, their infrastructure automation and deployment options. That's really what this is about from a customer perspective.
And if I'm not wrong, you reached that milestone working with Carahsoft. They're often called the Amazon of government IT. Can you talk about how that partnership helps you reach the federal market faster and what new doors it opens for Spacelift?
Yeah, so Carahsoft is, as you mentioned, the Amazon, it's a major player in terms of procurement of software in the federal market. And, not just federal, SLED, right, state and local. So, and the ability to partner with them, I think gives us, we've been seeing a lot of demand from government agencies. And so that's where FedRAMP really started to come into play. And by the way, I think an interesting note as well on FedRAMP, it's not just government agencies that are also looking for this. There's a lot of private industry that are saying, hey, if I'm going to operate and bring a SaaS and a SaaS-based application, especially managing my critical infrastructure or my critical business processes, I want to make sure it is FedRAMP certified, because that is a good marker of security for me. So now Carahsoft is a major player in procurement and selling to government, government agencies. And so the ability for us to partner with them really opens up a big avenue and a big route to market for us for a lot of federal SLED, government agencies. And so you pair Carahsoft with our FedRAMP certification, it really, I think, opens the gates for us to a whole new set of customers that, are demanding solutions like Spacelift.
You also close a 51 million Series C round. Where are you putting that investment to work, especially with the push into public sector and your broader goals around infrastructure automation?
Yeah, so I think that funding is really for a few areas. Of course, product innovation. You can see some of the stuff we've recently done. I mean, you look at FedRAMP, it's part of a broader pull we're seeing from the market about um, orchestration. Is not just about speed, the speed at which you can deploy infrastructure. It's also how can you bring real control and policies into your automation as well, because people want to go fast, they want speed, but they also need control over what they're deploying, who can deploy it, and how resilient it is. And so in terms of the funding, we want to accelerate innovation. So FedRAMP's a great example. I mean, we've been working on this before the funding, but it's another example of where we're expanding our reach into new markets. You're going to see some really exciting innovation coming from Spacelift in the areas of, infrastructure automation, infrastructure as code, and the way we can help people not just deploy infrastructure, manage it long term, accelerate the rate at which they're able to deploy it. So there's a number of places we see that we believe, enhance DevOps and platform teams, across more of the work they're doing day to day. And that's really what we see the funding. And there's, of course, associated that growing our marketing reach, growing our sales, but that's the heart of what we're really looking to do with that funding.
You folks are doing a lot of work in the community space as well. You organized the first IaCConf and later Spotlight security event. Can you talk about why are these gatherings important and how do they tie into your overall strategy to grow and educate the IaC community?
Yeah. So when it comes to community, I think I'd really talk about two, main community projects we're involved in. One is OpenTofu. So, OpenTofu is really, you look at a lot of open source projects and they're interesting. They'll have like a single vendor that's really sponsoring it. And so they're open source, and some really drive true community involvement, but some are single vendor and not really that open. With OpenTofu, we wanted to really bring a real community feel to how do you actually have an open source infrastructure as code, you know, tool that people can use, and especially in response to what like Terraform had done with changing the way their license is and closing it some, making it less open, if you will. And so that was really that started in 2023, where ourselves and a number of other companies band together to start OpenTofu, and it's a truly open source project, and it is sponsored by a number of actual competing companies. So it's not one company. So that was our first, and OpenTofu has seen some huge adoption and real big traction. And we're a major, we are the largest sponsor of OpenTofu when it comes to sponsors. So that's one, part of our culture and part of our real belief of community. And then there's a second one where we really stepped back last year and looked at the market and said, there's not really a community, a conference, a place for people to come together, DevOps engineers, platform engineers, SRE, whoever, who is really, trying to understand best practices, what's next, what's really going going on in the world of infrastructure as code. So we created IaCConf, and we kind of are the ones who shepherd it and run it and guide it. But is a truly, if you go and look at IaCConf, Spacelift is listed as the presenter, but it's really about the community. And we had our first event in May of this year with a big success. We had some great panels, really huge involvement, thousands and thousands of people who were both register and attending. And we got a lot of really positive feedback and demand for doing what we call spotlights. So smaller sessions on target, on specific targeted topics. And so we just held this month our first spotlight, which was IaCConf Spotlight Security. So it was all about security in IaC. And so it was interesting that was the top topic people wanted to talk about. And it's interesting how it somewhat relates back to FedRAMP, because FedRAMP was all about bringing security and governance into your cloud. And we're seeing that demand a lot in the IaC world. And so it was interesting to us that the first topic people wanted a deep dive on was security. So we had IaCConf security, and then we're actually in KubeCon this year, in North America, KubeCon in Atlanta, we're going to be holding IaCConf Connect, which is the other thing people really wanted to have was a way to get together in person and take this community not just online. Most of the events we've done so far have been online. This is us bringing the community together in a event like KubeCon to where we can face-to-face meet and have networking and discussion all around IaC. So that's the community aspects we really hold dear to our heart at Spacelift.
Just out of curiosity, when it comes to Terraform, IBM acquired HashiCorp. There are discussions going on because IBM is one of the biggest supporters of Linux and open source. We remember the Linux ad that they created ages ago where a kid was sitting in front of TV and they was telling them, I can learn, I can, and they showed it was Linux. They also kind of own Red Hat as well, and Red Hat runs as an independent company. So since Terraform did play a very critical role in this space, do you see any discussions going on there where you feel like, yes, the license may change, or you feel like OpenTofu has evolved so much, developed so much that it doesn't really matter now?
Yeah, I think it doesn't really matter. I think OpenTofu has a huge amount of momentum. I think people are, when they think about contributing to a project or the future of where infrastructure, as the open source availability and innovation is coming, it's really in OpenTofu. So we'll see what they do. I don't think it has huge bearings on OpenTofu or where people will turn to look for, the open source and kind of innovation of IaC in the future.
The ideal would be HashiCorp becomes a contributor and OpenTofu become the upstream project. That would be the ideal way going forward. Let's just zoom out for a bit. The infrastructure space is kind of fragmented. The infrastructure as code space itself has plenty of pain points. Things like fragmentation across tools, keeping infrastructure state in sync, and making sure compliance and security are built in at scale. From your perspective, what are some of the biggest challenges customers are running into today, and how is Spacelift helping them address those challenges?
Sure. I think there's that's a broad question, which is great. I can give you both a high level view of where we see people in their struggles with the kind of infrastructure automation, and then some of the things we're really doing to help address those, both the standard problems people see and what we see kind of, next coming. So when you step back, we really look at there's 3 or 4 phases where people start to use IaC. Step one is, we've been doing ClickOps, we've been manually deploying infrastructure in the cloud via cloud portals. We want to move to more automated, and they start using, Terraform, OpenTofu, but they're using it more in kind of a local capacity. They might have all their DevOps engineers, and each of them is using IaC on their own and running deployments from their own laptops. And that's kind of step one. And it's like, hey, we've got some automation, but you don't have a lot of centralization. It's single player mode, if you will. And we want, multiplayer, and you don't have good visibility into who's deploying what's been deployed, or controls over that. So the next step is, hey, I'm starting to see some success with this. How do I centralize and start really looking to bring it into a centralized way of managing my infrastructure as code, my infrastructure automation? And that's where often people will, turn to an orchestration engine, or they might start to use something like a GitOps, their traditional software CI/CD pipelines. And so that's the next phase where people are like, hey, okay, how do I centralize this? How do I bring some control? How do I make sure my developers can go fast, but I have the control I need? And we see a lot of people at this stage come to Spacelift, or they'll kind of organically use their CI/CD, their software CI/CD, and they eventually run into problems there of the difference between a traditional CI/CD managing software and managing infrastructure are quite different. And you don't really feel it till you start to scale, right? There's state, there's the idea of what's been deployed, there's permissions of who can deploy what. These things live on and continue to run. So it's different than package up software, and it's a package you can deploy. So that's where we see a lot of people. And then the third phase is really, okay, now that I've started to centralize, how do I bring in the governance? How do I bring in other teams? How do I start to go beyond just deploying infrastructure step one, kind of day one operations, and how do I move to more long-term operational management with my automation? So those are the phases we see, and the challenges we see people have are, multifold. One is, hey, I don't have the controls I need because anyone can make a change. How do I have these controls in place and policies in place to allow people to go fast, but the DevOps team has control of what is actually deployed? And how do I have a streamlined process so developers can have self-service? We've spun all this up in terms of infrastructure infrastructure is a bad word there. We've spun up a platform to allow infrastructure to be deployed rapidly. How do developers come and be able to self-service, right? Those are the types of problems we have people coming to us. Or we've started this, but we're now trying to scale it from one environment to our whole, enterprise, and the solution we have is not scaling. Those are the types of problems we see a lot of people struggling with when it comes to infrastructure as code.
Now let's go back and talk about FedRAMP a bit. When you look at FedRAMP, expanded deployment option, and a fast-growing ecosystem of IaC tools, it feels like Spacelift itself is evolving too. Where do you see the platform taking enterprise infrastructure automation over the next few years? One thing that COVID and ChatGPT taught us, don't talk about 5 years from now because we don't know what new technology will show up tomorrow and it will just change the market. But still, how does the future look like?
Where do I see things headed? I think so for Spacelift, or the broader, or both, I guess. Where do I
mean, it's tied together.
Yeah, it is. So, for Spacelift, I see a couple things. I see Carahsoft's a great example of ways we see partner programs and partners to be a real leverage effect for us. We're starting to see a lot of traction with companies out there who are working with DevOps teams and enterprises, either to expand their automation or to bring automation to their infrastructure, and they're coming to us. So that's a big route for us to grow, I believe. We're also seeing, what's next in terms of the industry. I think GitOps and IaC is great for some use cases. There's other use cases where, you're seeing things like vibe coding and AI, like software development being, AI'd and vibe coded. How does infrastructure keep up? And so I think there's areas there where infrastructure automation can allow developers to move very fast for certain environments, keep the, IaC and GitOps structure for other environments. Like, how do you start to have different ways and different on-ramps for deployment options for infrastructure that match the use case that is being, developed? Is it a production workload? Is it more of a workload for a POC? How do we meet the scale and speed that AI is bringing to software development and bring that to infrastructure management? So, you could call it just how do you leverage AI in infrastructure? Sure, that's part of it. But I think the real challenge to the industry is with software development really accelerating, with also, I believe, so you have developers wanting to create more infrastructure on their own than ever before and faster. Do we envision in the future you're being able to see actual agents starting to want to deploy infrastructure? How do you meet that demand? That's really a big part of what we see the infrastructure automation space evolving into.
Now let's just go back and talk about federal agencies a bit. A lot of things are changing here in the US with the US government. For those federal agencies and contractors that may still be early in their IaC journey, what are some of the most immediate benefits they will see from Spacelift now that you are FedRAMP certified?
So what they get with working with Spacelift being FedRAMP certified is you're able to go from, well, I'm thinking about IaC and automation for my infrastructure deployment, and what are the learning steps I have to go to a turnkey solution that allows you to, you don't have to worry about that part about your infrastructure program. You want to automate your workflows. You want to integrate with how developers are actually self-serving. You want to be able to have the rigor of code brought into how you manage your infrastructure. Great, we can do that at scale, turnkey, as part of just out of the box Spacelift for federal agencies. That's the benefit of FedRAMP certification, right? Otherwise, they can't use. No other orchestration engine can they use in a FedRAMP environment. They're not certified. So I think that's the big advantage. It allows you to go from 0 to 60 really quickly when it comes to how you want to modernize the way you're developing applications in the cloud and managing your infrastructure in the cloud for federal agencies.
As you expand both in the public sector and enterprise market, how do you ensure customers get not just automation at scale, but also security, compliance, and governance built in for day one?
If you step back for a second and look at, we talked a little bit, that's what are the common challenges people have. There are two main challenges at the highest level that people come to us for. We're moving too slow with our deployments, right? We're trying to innovate, we're trying to build software, and the rate at which the DevOps or platform team is deploying infrastructure is too slow. Our developer velocity is too slow. The other is, hey, we're going really quickly. We're deploying all this infrastructure. There's a little bit of chaos though, and I need control. I need governance. I need security around that infrastructure. Those are the two high-level buckets that people really come to us for. And so what's really interesting about the FedRAMP piece is there's, even in enterprises, we have more and more enterprises, and I think this is true not just of the area we're in. There's more and more companies that are enterprises, private sector, who want FedRAMP, who want to buy SaaS products that are running in FedRAMP certified environments because they know is a higher level of security. And we have plenty of enterprises who have those same governance and security and compliance concerns as the government agencies do. So there's huge synergy there in terms of large enterprises and government entities.
Dimitri, thank you so much for joining me today and sharing these great insights with our audience. It is clear that Spacelift is making big moves, not only in the private sector, but now in the public sector as well. Thank you so much for your time today, and I look forward to talk to you again. Thank you.
Thank you, Swapnil. Always great to chat.
Back to our audience, if your organization is tackling challenges in infrastructure automation, we'd love to hear from you. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and stay tuned for more conversations.